Welcome to part 1 of The Ego and the Dualities, selections from The Life Divine by Sri Aurobindo, vegetarian, on Words of Wisdom. India is the home of many great spiritual masters who have brought wisdom and truth to earth. Their lives and compassionate teachings inspire us to seek a higher purpose in life, thus uplifting humanity to a more divine state of being. One such great figure is the spiritual master, yogi, philosopher, poet and politician Sri Aurobindo, who graced our planet from 1872 to 1950. Sri Aurobindo's time as a politician was dedicated to achieving India's independence. However, after inner reflection, Sri Aurobindo retired from politics and service to his country. His aspirations turned instead toward the liberation of all humanity. Sri Aurobindo traveled to Pondicherry on the southeastern coast of India, where he retreated into the practice of silent yoga. Based on the inner knowledge revealed to him during his spiritual practice, Sri Aurobindo began publishing writings full of wisdom. Originally written by Sri Aurobindo between 1914 and 1919, The Life Divine describes the spiritual journey that unfolds as a person sincerely seeks the highest truth. Such a journey leads to the soul's awakening and the direct experience of divinity. Today we present to you excerpts from Chapter 7, The Ego and the Dualities, from the book The Life Divine. Chapter 7, The Ego and the Dualities. The soul seated on the same tree of nature is absorbed and deluded and has sorrow because it is not the Lord. But when it sees and is in union with that other self and greatness of it which is the Lord, then sorrow passes away from it. Sweta Satara Upanishad. If all is in truth Satchidananda, the one divine being with a triple aspect of existence, consciousness and delight, death, suffering, evil, limitation can only be the creations, positive in practical effect, negative in essence, of a distorting consciousness which has fallen from the total and unifying knowledge of itself into some error of division and partial experience. This is the fall of man typified in the poetic parable of the Hebrew Genesis. That fall is his deviation from the full and pure acceptance of God and himself, or rather of God in himself, into a dividing consciousness which brings with it all the train of the dualities, life and death, good and evil, joy and pain, completeness and want, the fruit of a divided being. This is the fruit which Adam and Eve, Purusa and Prakriti, the soul tempted by nature, have eaten. The redemption comes by the recovery of the universal in the individual and of the spiritual term in the physical consciousness. Then alone the soul in nature can be allowed to partake of the fruit of the tree of life and be as the divine and live forever. For then only can the purpose of its descent into material consciousness be accomplished, when the knowledge of good and evil, joy and suffering, life and death has been accomplished through the recovery by the human soul of a higher knowledge which reconciles and identifies these opposites in the universal and transforms their divisions into the image of the divine unity. To Satchidananda, the one divine being with the triple aspect of existence, consciousness and delight, extended in all things in widest commonality and impartial universality, death, suffering, evil and limitation can only be at the most reversed terms, shadow forms of their luminous opposites. As these things are felt by us, they are notes of a discord. They formulate separation where there should be a unity, miscomprehension where there should be an understanding, an attempt to arrive at independent harmonies where there should be a self-adaptation to the orchestral whole. All totality, even if it be only in one scheme of the universal vibrations, even if it be only a totality of the physical consciousness without possession of all that is in movement beyond and behind, must be to that extent a reversion to harmony and a reconciliation of jarring opposites. On the other hand, to Satchidananda, transcendent of the forms of the universe, the dual terms themselves, even so understood, can no longer be justly applicable. Transcendence transfigures, it does not reconcile, but rather transmutes opposites into something surpassing them that effaces their oppositions. At first, however, we must strive to relate the individual again to the harmony of the totality. There it is necessary for us, otherwise there is no issue from the problem. To realize that the terms in which our present consciousness renders the values of the universe, though practically justified for the purposes of human experience and progress, are not the sole terms in which it is possible to render them, and may not be the complete, the right, the ultimate formulas. Just as there may be sense organs or formations of sense capacity which see the physical world differently, and it may well be better because more completely than our sense organs and sense capacity, so there may be other mental and supramental envisagings of the universe which surpass our own. States of consciousness there are, in which death is only a change in immortal life, pain a violent backwash of the waters of universal delight, limitation a turning of the infinite upon itself, evil a circling of the good around its own perfection, and this not in abstract conception only, but in actual vision and in constant and substantial experience. To arrive at such states of consciousness may for the individual be one of the most important and indispensable steps of its progress towards self-perfection. Certainly, the practical values given us by our senses and by the dualistic sense mind must hold good in their field and be accepted as the standard for ordinary life experience, until a larger harmony is ready, into which they can enter and transform themselves without losing hold of the realities which they represent. To enlarge the sense faculties without the knowledge that would give the old sense values their right interpretation from the new standpoint might lead to serious disorders and incapacities, might unfit for practical life and for the orderly and disciplined use of the reason. Equally, an enlargement of our mental consciousness out of the experience of the egoistic dualities into an unregulated unity with some form of total consciousness might easily bring about a confusion and incapacity for the active life of humanity in the established order of the world's relativities. This, no doubt, is the root of the injunction imposed in the Gita on the man who has the knowledge not to disturb the life basis and thought basis of the ignorant, for impelled by his example but unable to comprehend the principle of his action, they would lose their own system of values without arriving at a higher foundation. For more information, please visit sriaurobindoashram.org.
We believe in justice for animals, the environment, and people. That's why we support the plant-based treaty and urge individuals and governments to sign it. Sir Paul, Mary and Stella McCartney, vegetarians.
Wondrous viewers, thank you for joining us today for Words of Wisdom.